This is Getting Past Subtitles. My name is Sean Peel.
And I'm DK Lee.
And welcome to, I don't know how many weeks it's been. This is week 5.
This is our fourth.
Fourth?
Right?
Okay. I trust your math more than my math right now.
We've watched Assassin. What was the other one?
I don't trust your math anymore. That's
we
it.
watched The Assassin. We watched, what was the name of the third one?
You're just skipping number 2. You're like, well,
we have to skip number 2 because the second son is not there either in this one.
We did Millennium Mambo.
Yes.
And then Goodbye South Goodbye. And then
this one.
And this one. Yeah.
But we got, 4 sons. We gotta take out the second one.
Yeah. Oh, I see. Yeah. We don't talk about the second child. No. But as far as the fourth child goes, A City of Sadness is what we watched this week.
Yes.
This came out in 1989. This is Hou Hsiao-hsien's 10th film. It's not a lot of movies, dude.
Yeah, I mean,
So
it's
many
also
movies.
like regarded as one of his best films.
Right.
I think
Mhm.
a lot of people
Yeah.
when they think about Hou Hsiao-hsien, they think about this one and Millennium Mambo usually.
Yeah.
Right? Those two.
That's fair. And yeah, this one was it was long.
Yes.
It was pretty long, but it's pretty interesting, I think, for the most part. I think the biggest glaring thing for me is like just kind of like I just like watched it blind. But I think there's a lot more to be gained if you go in knowing like
Some context.
knowing the context. Like it's a basically like a historical drama, right? But you kind of have to know like the history behind it and the setting that the movie is taking place in to really kind of really understand like the impact and just like the drop back of the entire setting
The
and
backdrop.
I knew, as soon as I said that, I was like, that's wrong. Backdrop.
Yeah.
The backdrop of like the settings of the family of like you just know like what they're going through, and because the movie takes place even over a couple of years, right? Like it's it does take place over an expansive amount of time, but it just kind of makes a lot more sense if you understand like the history of Taiwan and like what they're going through at the time.
Yeah.
And because in the movie, it's nothing is explicitly said. It kind of happens almost in real time, right? And like the big glaring issues kind of happen in the background.
Yeah.
And it's very like micro to macro, right? Like we're getting like a peek into like a family and like how it's all affecting like a family unit, while like everything else is happening around them, right? Kind
Yeah.
of how we experience like large like political events or things of that nature that we might not be able to see until we pull back, but something's kind of like leaking, right?
Yeah, it's kind of similar to Goodbye South Goodbye in that regard of you're not always in the thick of the action. It's
Yeah.
kind of like the action sometimes comes to you, but then you're not really like in the midst of like people fighting and like you're not
Very well.
seeing like the people getting shot and people dying and assassinated, right? A lot of times what you're seeing is like Wenqing in jail, right? Like he's just sitting there and
Yeah.
watching the people go by who are getting executed or who are leaving. Or you're like with Hiromi and she's kind of sad about the fact that she can't see Wenqing anymore, and she goes to his house and like tries to figure out what's going on. Like those are very typical of the types of moments that you might have if you're literally in that situation. Unless you're like literally ones like being in the resistance like Hiroe, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
he kind of is a lot more involved
Right.
in the thick of things. But since our main character is like Wenqing and Hiromi, you don't really get that.
Yeah. They're not seeking it out, right?
Right.
Yeah. They're not seeking
Yeah.
to resist or
And there are moments in this movie actually that are more action packed, and that's like when we're
Yeah, yeah.
with when I think it's when the older brother,
Oh, when Hung.
when Hung, yeah,
Mhm.
when like he's like gambling and then he like fights the
The mom,
mafia and
yeah.
then he dies, right? Like
Yeah,
those
yeah.
are like moments when like we're like in the action, or like, you know, when they're fighting in the restaurant, I think it is, and stuff like that.
Yeah, something, yeah.
Yeah, like stuff like that. You get like more of the action, but it's not really the action that happens because of the political surroundings,
Right,
more
right.
about the more intimate like family issues,
Yeah, yeah.
or like, you know,
It's just
um
like the little part like
yeah, things
that they're
happening with the
involved in.
locals, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, like
exactly.
it's a
Yeah,
lot more of those things that are going on that you get to see, rather than this like big political thing, and like
yeah.
you're
Right, right.
seeing all the people within the political factions, like, you know,
Mhm.
pushing this agenda.
Yeah, yeah. So it's pretty neat. It's really like, knowing that, like, it's really impactful. Um and it's a really really good peek into like what life was like then,
Yeah, like
and
as a family, right?
right, right, right. And just like I mean, this is like a particularly interesting family as well.
Yeah.
Um and yeah, it's pretty good. I knowing that, like, reading that, like, this was a really tough period in Taiwan. I mean, this was uh like a really big point of transition essentially. And so, like, right, like, takes place right after World War II, right? Taiwan gains independence again after Japanese occupation. Um and so it's almost like a roller coaster. So they have like a really high up. It's like, and then it's like back to oppression
Mhm.
again after the Nationalist Party. And so a lot of things happen in that regard. But yeah, I think it does a really good job in doing both worlds of like depicting like the stakes and like the set piece of it, but also exploring like the family and the family strife and equal parts of the brothers, because there's like a lot of characters. Like, I think uh 20 20
Tony
Lau,
Lin.
Tony
Tony
Lung,
Lung, yeah.
right? Obviously he's a really big name now. The man is like a baby in this movie. He's so young. Obviously he kind of like steals the show a little bit, like, as a big name star. I don't know how big he was then, maybe not as big, but it's certainly going into it now. It's like, but even he shares, I think, equally part of the screen as much as all the other brothers do, right? So it does a really good job of like splitting the story between everybody. Because what I found interesting was like what I had to like piece together was how much of like all the brother stories are involved or not involved together, right? Because they go through their own things, but by the end they kind of all actually kind of wrap together in a way, right?
Mhm.
So I thought that was pretty neat for the most part.
Yeah. The movie, it's not very yeah, it's not very easy to watch, I think, in terms of like understanding it from the first part,
Yeah,
from
yeah,
the beginning, because of all the contextual things that you have to understand. But I think when you do uh like get around to that, I think you can appreciate the subtlety of
yeah,
it all. I think a lot of times like movies like to push what's very like provocative, and you know what's like fun for the eyes, you know,
yeah,
fun to
yeah,
watch. But this movie kind of makes you contemplate about what's happening,
yeah,
and the plight of the families and what they're going through, and it's more realistic, I think, in that portrayal of things,
100%. Yeah,
because a lot of times like we don't have much in real life. I don't think there is as much of these like full action packed moments. A lot of times it's kind of a very lull, right? It's like
yeah,
a
yeah.
lull that we go through in
Hmm.
life, and it's there are a lot of quiet moments in life, and especially I think um back then even more so, because of the fact that, you know, now we have like so much technology, and we can like take in so much stuff, and
Yeah,
like
yeah,
we're bombarded with things. But
yeah,
back then it's a lot more, you know, tranquil in one sense, in the sense of like there was like peace if you just like you know when if you were looking for it. It was very readily available even when you're just sitting alone in your house kind of. And I think this kind of evokes that in certain ways. A lot of the um imagery of like the big landscapes that you see,
Yeah.
and the the moment, and even Munching as a character, like he can't even talk, he can't hear, and that kind of shows like that he's almost helpless in one way, and yet he wants to do things, but at the end of the day, like he's kind of like going through um life like a river is just like taking him through all these different
Yeah.
places, because he can't really like exert his own
Right.
own
Right.
will on things the way that he might want to because of his disabilities. And I think that's an interesting like way of looking at that period of time, especially
Right.
with all the political things that are happening,
Mhm.
and the way even at the end, right, like he gets captured, right, and then but it's like she's just writing a letter, we don't even see him
Yeah. Yeah.
gone, and all of that I think goes to just show that feeling of helplessness, or like feeling of like not being in control of that of those
Yeah.
moments.
Right. Yeah. I think that's actually a really good theme that carries throughout like the entirety of the film in a way, actually, because a lot of like their situation, a lot of like sort of the stakes and the strife that they go through ends up kind of feeling helpless for the most part.
Yeah.
Um, and it's funny because it's like it starts off as like kind of like in a time of like independence and sort of like there's like a highness to it. There's a
They're having
freedom,
party, and
right?
then
Yeah, yeah,
they're having good time in the restaurant, and
right. So it starts off on a good footing with
it starts off with like a birth, right, like a birth of the
yes,
child.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And all the brothers are kind of living their own life, and things are there's what was the word I'm looking for? I mean, there's there's just like a lot of good things coming about. Um, and they're not like inviting strife into their own lives, obviously, right? They're just kind of living their fulfillment the best that they can at the moment. And as things kind of get tough on the outside, um, things kind of get tougher on the inside for them. I mean, it really starts with the third brother, right? With Wen Lung, as he kind of gets into some
It's like,
mob gangster
yeah,
stuff
yeah,
essentially, and that those ties end up leaning back to the older brother, and then just like within the entire family eventually. Um, but it's just funny to see like where it kind of starts to where it ends, um, and how it feels like there's like an inevitability to it, right? Like the movie ends with like all the brothers are pretty much gone, right?
yeah,
Um, which is actually like really sad.
yeah,
It's really like it's really unfortunate, but looking at the whole movie as a whole, like it feels like there is that kind of trajectory, and like the helplessness kind of like feels like oh, we're eventually gonna get to that point. It's like one by one, like you kind of like lose a brother
yeah.
to another brother to another brother, um, and there's not really any like specific change or action or like an opportunity to kind of change that change
Yeah,
that fact by the end.
it's like an inevitability, and life goes on. I thought that
Right,
was kind of
right.
interesting because the ending shot of the movie is like they're eating at the
Yeah,
table, and like people are going in and out,
it's an
and like
active like family dinner.
and yeah,
Yeah.
it's a family dinner, and people are eating, and it kind of, for me, it felt like life moved on, like
Yeah, yeah.
these brothers all met their fate in certain ways,
Right.
and yet the family's still
They carry on.
trucking through, and
Yeah.
they're still carrying on and living their lives. And I think that's a very uh strong message, I think, and I kind of like a message of life in one way, right? Like,
Sure, yeah.
people come and go, and yet,
Yeah.
people who are alive still, go
Right,
on
right.
and live their life, and they don't necessarily like forget those people who died, but eventually everyone will, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Even
Nothing
even
stops because they
right,
die,
nothing
right? Yeah.
stops, and I think that's a very one way kind of hopeful and one way a little sad,
Morbid.
right? Yeah, like like the title implies.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, yeah, it's a really good reflection of what the movie is.
Mm.
But yeah, no death feels particularly. I mean, they're certainly sad, and there is.
But it's not like devastating in the sense that like when we watch the main characters like loved one die, you're like,
Yeah.
oh, so sad.
Yeah, exactly.
Where this one you're like, oh,
There really isn't a moment of grief, or at least there kind of is, but not impactful.
they
Like, we
well
just
they don't
never
play
stay.
it. They don't play it for the emotion, right?
Right,
Because
right.
even in the funeral for when Hung, right,
The
the older brother,
yeah,
like you get the funeral and you get that
yeah.
that take of the
It's
whole
like the whole
family.
Yeah,
But it's a wide, and you never get into a close up,
no,
and you're never like really with the characters like individually. You don't
Right,
really
right.
know what they're fully thinking. You just see every individual family and the collective
yeah.
grieving for the brother, but not necessarily like a a individual like
Yeah.
aspect of like we're seeing this person cry and we're seeing this person like thinking about or reminiscing. You don't get
Yeah,
any of that,
yeah.
and
You get like a little moment, and then it
right,
moves
a
on
lot of
to
times other movies they might use that as a way of pulling on your heartstrings, right? Like
right,
bringing
right.
that grief in. But I think this movie kind of wasn't really interested too much in that aspect
Right.
of sadness, more of the grander idea of the fact that people coming and going and people dying and
Yeah.
like even the second brother, you're like, what second brother? What second brother? You
What
didn't
second
even know.
brother? Yeah, you didn't-
Like he was like totally non-existent in the movie, and so you're like there are even from the outset like the family like moves on from these things,
Yeah.
and then it's really like a part of life that like you lose people, right? Like especially in that um era of turmoil and
Yeah.
and like
Constant violence.
yeah,
and-
constant violence. You're like, yeah, you never know when somebody's gonna get captured or like somebody's gonna die, and that's really been a part of their lives, and so they have to adapt to that
Right,
and
right.
like accept that for what it is, and I think that's how they're coping with it in one sense, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And because it's funny because like right after the funeral it's the marriage.
Yeah.
Right? It's like a
Yeah.
complete like
180.
180 of
Yeah.
what's going on there too. So that's an interesting
I thought that was really
aspect
interesting.
of it.
Yeah. Also, like their costumes for the wedding,
Mm.
which is like very Western.
Yeah.
It's funny because I mean, like as you were talking about that, I was like, the way that they treat death, and particularly because again, we're not with a single character. We see like a group of characters and how they respond. But even I was thinking of the host when the daughter gets captured and they're all mourning like her with that lost.
Yeah,
And they're
yeah.
like they're like the big scene. They're like
Yeah. Exactly.
making a huge fuss on the whole thing. Like nothing to that extent.
Yeah.
That's
It's a different kind. They're going for different things, right?
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And so I mean it works in this movie certainly, but even like I think the most, which I mean it kind of felt in a way, but the most impactful sort of loss would have been Hiroe, like Wenshin's best friend. Once because he went with like a guerrilla group, and he like
In the
went into
mountains.
hiding into the mountains, and then they eventually got caught and they were all executed.
Yeah.
And when he got word of that, like then it was just like the shot of him, the wife, and their newborn.
Yeah.
And I mean they were grieving certainly, but it was kind of similar, right? It was just like in a wide, and it was just this moment. It's like a moment of silence. It's
That was a
just-
beautiful shot though.
Yeah,
I really
yeah.
like that shot, but yeah, like she's like trying to feed the kid,
yeah.
and then he comes with the news, and she's like she reads it,
Oof.
but then she's like still trying to feed the kid, and then
Yeah,
like
yeah,
later
yeah.
on like she actually reads it and she like falls apart.
Yeah.
It's very
And you don't know because you don't have the context at that moment until
Yeah.
the next a few shots where
Yeah,
where it shows you like
him
them
getting
getting
captured.
captured
Yeah, yeah,
and them getting executed.
yeah. So I like that how he flipped it, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
because normally it would be like them getting captured, and then you go into that
right,
moment,
right.
but then you get the shot of Wenqing at the door, and then somebody's like knocking at the door, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And with
yeah,
the
yeah.
letter,
Hmm.
and then it's like, and then you get to the next shot, which is like her in the dark trying to feed the kid, and then like
Right,
the light
right.
turns on, and he comes in, and then you're like, it's just
What's
what's
going
going on?
on? Why
Yeah.
are we sad? Wait, wait.
Mommy, why are you crying?
You know what's funny? I was like, did you get word that they found out like the kid was deaf? But I was like, no, that like the scene prior, she was just writing like in a letter, like narrating that their son spoke the first word.
Yeah,
And like,
mommy, and
yeah. And I was like, that can't be right. So
Yeah.
what could it
But
be?
I like that shot. It's like what I loved about it was how the kid takes the paper
Yeah, he's like, nah.
and like plays with the paper, and that's such a golden shot. Like how I don't know if it's luck or if you told that kid pick up that
People
paper,
got that paper.
right? But that's like a golden shot, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think in that regard, that scene was probably the most masterfully done here. I think that was a really beautiful scene. And also the other scene too, like also just juxtaposing the funeral to the marriage was also another interesting choice as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
I gotta say, this movie, I think for me personally, picked up a lot more during the end of the
100%.
movie.
I was for the first hour, dude. I was really struggling
Because I'm trying to figure out what's happening, or like
Yeah.
what are we supposed to get out of these,
Yeah.
these scenes, and
And it's really not one, like plot wise, it's not one particular thing. It's kind of an epic, right? Like it's an epic tale of like this family because they go through so many things.
Yeah.
And it starts with kind of them at their highest, and then eventually they all pass away in some regard. And so there isn't like the through line, like there isn't an objective, I guess, in a conventional way.
yeah,
The through line is really just like the brothers and like
yeah. I
in this
think
time
one of
period.
the reasons is like it takes a while for us to like understand who's who.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
I think that's kind of like
That's
a
always the
thing
hardest
about
part,
I
right?
think that for his movies, I think that's kind of like the hardest part about getting into it is like who is who, like what am I, like what are the things that I have to be like looking for
Right,
in the
right.
movie.
Yeah,
I think that Goodbye South Goodbye is the same thing, right? Like you're like trying to figure out like who's who, like what
Yeah.
are they, like who are they, like what are
what are
they,
their relationships to each other?
it's not like we're given like a specific scene that really tackles this character.
right.
A lot of movies, like the very first thing that you get is the introduction of the character, right? Like this is the kind of person he is. Like you get a really like fast like rundown of like, oh yeah, he's the cool guy who is really good at martial arts, and he's able to
Right.
beat people up, and he is on a mission, right? Like that's
Yeah,
like the
yeah.
first like scene that you get, and
Yeah.
you're like, okay, I kind of have an idea of what this person is, right?
Yeah.
But like in his movies, it's like you're watching the scenes and you're like, who is
What's
he?
going on?
What is
Yeah.
he, like? What's his motive? What is he trying to do? Like, it's not really that kind of movie, and so it takes you a while to like really be like, okay, so he is this kind of character, and this guy's like this kind of character,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it has to kind of melt into.
Yeah. Then it like
into
becomes
your-
a picture
Yeah,
later.
yeah, and they kind of you kind of figure out, oh, okay, that's why he was kind
Yeah.
of like that, or like
It just takes so long to get there.
Yeah.
And I guess that's the only benefit of his movies being so long is because at least I'm not, by the time I figure it out, I'm only like halfway through the movie.
Right.
So I at least have the other half to enjoy. Right?
The other half to be like, okay, now I'm kind of getting it.
Yeah. I'm not like the end of the movie comes and I'm like, I got it. And like the credits are rolling. I'm like, I gotta rewatch that again now.
2 hours, 30 minutes rewatch. Yeah. But I do definitely see that in this movie.
Yeah. That's why I said earlier, like in the beginning, it's if you even just going through, because I think a lot of it lends to obviously the historical part of the movie. Like if you understand, which is funny because I didn't piece it together, but like like not too long ago recently, I was actually kind of getting interested in like just like a brief history of like Taiwan, because like with all the current things that happen between mainland China and like Taiwan, there's a
Mm.
lot of conflicts going on today. So I was like getting a TLDR of like the history of all that. And so once I that clicked, once I like was understanding what was going on, and I like that clicked in the part of it, I was like, oh, okay. It's like this is during that period of like when it was going on. So once you get that sort of TLDR, it helps a lot into like understanding.
Yeah, context helps a lot
Yeah,
in
yeah.
movies like this for sure.
So especially because a big part is like this was kind of a political film in a way, right? It's a sort of bringing up like a dirty history in their time, and openly doing so. And so it really just is the centerpiece of the movie.
Mm.
So you kind of have to know it to really get to just get kind of the point and like the most out of the story as well. So
Yeah.
um and that's like it's not a detriment either. It's just kind of like something to note.
Yeah.
Essentially.
I think it's like it goes both ways, I think. It's like if you watch this without knowing that,
Yeah.
then I think if you watch this movie, it makes you wonder like what is like all the political things that are going on in the
Yeah,
back,
yeah, yeah.
and maybe it might make you want to like find out about that.
Sure. Yeah.
So it's like both ways, I think. Like in one way it's like it does a disservice because it doesn't fully like explain everything.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't think it should explain things. I think it was
No, no.
good the way that they did it.
Yeah.
It's just the fact of like how people are not, how people don't know things,
Right, right.
and how they would, perceive things.
If it well, it's funny because well, the movie feels it is made for that audience. It is like made for like that
People who
period.
know.
Yeah, yeah. Like just people in Taiwan. It feels like it's made for Taiwan specifically, right? And it just doesn't really matter. Like it doesn't care for anybody else to watch it.
Yeah,
Essentially,
yeah.
it feels very personal in that sense,
Mhm.
right? And so if it's good to like ends up being a catalyst to do your own research and to kind of look into it, and then you can really understand everything else about the movie. But it's really not made for kind of anybody else, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's why it's so good is because like it just really is tackling and it is
Yeah.
made like so specifically.
But it's also not like an overtly political
No,
movie,
no.
which is what I like about it too. It's like
Yeah,
it's really dealing about the family and the
yeah,
problems that they have while dealing with this bigger political
yeah,
event in their lives.
yeah. I think like this is a really good illustration. It's just the difference between like what a documentary is versus like what like a film is, right?
Mhm.
Because it's not documenting, like it's not a political film in the sense that it's giving you history
Right,
and
it's
like
fiction. It's
documenting.
not it's
Yeah, it's
not
fiction.
real. These are not real people.
Yeah, but it is giving you like it is placing it in that time, right?
Right.
And it is kind of it's giving you a peek into like what it
It's
is
like
like.
the emotional atmosphere of that time,
Right,
right?
right.
Like that the feeling of being in that moment and having to
Yeah.
deal with these kinds of things happening, and
Mhm.
if you were in that family, like
Yeah,
how
yeah.
this might affect you, and like you're it's kind of painting the background of this time
Yeah.
period
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
that makes you feel like, oh, I kind of understand like what they might have went through
Mhm.
as human beings,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Like as people, who are kind of like involved, but also just trying to live their life,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And so it's really well done. It is
Yeah.
really, really well made. I think I don't know. I do like this more than a couple other of its movies that we watched too. The more like um I think I liked it better than Goodbye South Goodbye. Um I think it does a better job in doing like it's funny because all of his movies, or definitely like the last two, including Millennium Mambo, like those kind of peek you into like a certain era, a certain like place. Like that's within like sort of the more gangster kind of like early 2000s underground world. and this is a little more. This is definitely more historic and more like you're saying. It does feel more grounded in a way. Like it feels more naturalistic, but I think it's just much well done in that sense.
Hmm.
It's just more interesting, I think, as well.
This movie.
Yeah,
Hmm.
than like any of those time places.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot to like piece through. I think in this movie,
Mhm.
especially. I mean, it's 2 hours and 30 minutes, so it's like there's a lot
Yeah.
to watch. There's some beautiful scenes in the movie for sure. There was like that scene with the fireworks. You remember that? Like it's more in the middle half, like near.
Was that like the festival
Yeah,
one
and
where
like
they were
there's
doing
like
like the dragon
and the
dance?
fireworks like popping everywhere,
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
like they're having dance and all that.
That,
Like
yeah,
beautiful
yeah. He was
shots.
like trying to sleep.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
was like,
yeah.
yeah,
And like shots of like the sky and like in the beginning when like the group is like eating and then they open the windows and then they're like singing out
yeah, yeah.
in the
Oh, yeah,
restaurant and
yeah. That was nice.
a lot of wide big shots of landscapes and stuff I always think are very. I mean, it reminds me a lot of like Japanese like Ozu
Kind of, yeah,
and
yeah.
that kind of style of filmmaking.
Right.
Especially like the way that he shoots like the interiors and like through doorways and
Yeah, yeah,
through like windows and
yeah.
utilizing that as a framing
Mhm.
is very like you're like peeking in
Right, right.
and watching like the family a lot of times and you're given a lot of like room
Yeah, yeah.
like a distance from them.
It feels like that the relationship from like the camera to uh like just the action, it almost feels like a play, right? In that sense, like because you see as much as like a lot of the interior as much as the characters and you see fully like where they can go like the entire space and they just the actors have freedom to like almost do exactly like whatever they want, right? Just to move around. It's similar to like a play, like they just have the entire stage to do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And we're just watching like a set, like we're just watching like the holistic of it essentially.
Yeah.
And so
and the filmmaker grabs your attention by like having characters have certain like dialogue or moments, right?
yeah, yeah.
Like it's especially prevalent, I think, in like a lot of the hospital scenes. It's always almost just like a wide
Yeah.
in
yeah.
that like lobby.
Yep.
And then like stuff happens and like people go in and they come back out and then there's like people, especially like that moment when they were like rioting or whatever in the hospital. Remember and then somebody got hurt and then they like pulled him in. Pulled him in with the stretcher and then another guy goes in. Like all that, like it's very like specifically blocked.
Yeah.
And he uses that space really well, and is able, and he's not afraid to have main characters look small. In the shots.
True. Yeah. Specifically, like anything that like where violence takes place. I feel like we're really wide.
Yeah, you're not even sure. Like, is he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, after a while, like once like the characters get jumbled up, I'm like, I don't even know which guy was fighting.
Yeah, even like a lot of the dinner like eating scenes and when they're around that restaurant table.
Yeah.
Like sometimes you're like one guy is just like facing the other way the whole time, right? Like because it's a round table.
Yeah.
And so there's a few people looking towards camera, but a lot of times they're kind of looking away from the camera, and sometimes like you're not when Ching like comes in frame, but his complete back turned towards the towards the camera, so like you're not even sure like
we don't exist.
Yeah, like it's very like characters are not like put on a pedestal in that way.
Right.
I think a lot of times in movies we want to always like we have this like inkling like urge to like be with the character, right, and be with the main character or stick with them and see their point of view on everything. But this movie shies away from that, or like I don't think it shies away from it. It does that on purpose, obviously, and I think it makes the movie feel a lot more not like a POV, not like one person's like idea of what's happening, but just like the holistic atmosphere of the time.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, it's not specific. It's not about one person or like
Yeah.
one. Yeah, we just like looking at
And yet
the
like
grouping.
there are like cool moments where like for example, when Hiromi writes, you get
Mhm.
kind of a closer, it's more like a medium, but
Yeah, yeah,
you know, you get like shots of her like writing, or like you get like a two shot of, you know, Hiromi and Wenqing like exchanging letters, you know,
yeah, yeah,
or stuff like that. You get more, a little bit more intimate. Like I think the most intimate was probably the scene when he gives a letter to her and she finds out that the brother is, you
yeah.
know, gone. um you know, things like that are very, very cool. I really like about this movie. um there's another scene that I really liked was when the train is passing by and then
Oh
the
yeah,
family's just
on the
standing
end.
there.
Yeah, yeah,
And then when you're watching that the first time, you're like, oh, like, uh, were they gonna go? Were they going somewhere? Are they going somewhere? But later on, like in the what do you call that?
in the
The
narration.
narration, yeah.
Yeah,
She says like, "Oh, we were gonna, you know, leave,
yeah,
flee, but then
escape.
there was nowhere to go." And then you look at that shot and like, "Oh,
They
they
were
were
trying to
actually gonna
escape.
go, but then they literally was just standing there and they didn't leave."
It
Right?
was not hyperbole.
Yeah, like you get that information later, and I think that's a
Yeah,
very nice way of like an afterthought
yeah,
of what happened.
and that's like constant tool in the movie. Like,
Yes,
yeah,
it is. Yeah,
yeah,
but I just really love that shot and how they utilize that in that scene and the
yeah,
scene after that, where
yeah.
she explains to the sister or the niece or whatever
Yeah.
in her letters that, like, you know, they were gonna leave and they didn't.
Her like what reoccurs is like her letters throughout the movie. Like she provides narration in pieces throughout, and like those are nice. Those add like a little more
Yeah,
context, a little more like filler in the
you
movie,
mean when it's like just the text,
or not just text, but like
her narrations?
yeah, her narrations,
Yeah,
because we read like her letters that happen.
yeah.
Most of the time, it's when people go missing.
Sad.
Sad, just sad.
Yeah. Basically.
'Cause I don't know where they went, but I missed them.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah, the narrations definitely do provide the most context to the things that are going on around.
yeah, yeah,
And like it's especially it grounds us with her emotions, right?
right, right.
And I think that's like a big part of it too.
Mhm. But funny enough, like she's definitely not a main character, but she feels, even with her narration, she doesn't feel particularly like focused on
Mhm.
throughout the movie, right?
Yeah, she doesn't feel focused on, but she is the main character in one sense, right? Because she
Yeah.
is the narrator.
Right,
And
right.
she's kind of the one that because she is the narrator, she's the one that we're like most like
Right.
looking
In from,
yeah,
or
like the
to, yeah,
POV is mostly
yeah.
through her narration. So like it's a very like
It's weird.
interesting like weird thing where it's like, yeah, she's like not in like more than half of the shots, but then she's also kind of the central narrator. So like we're kind of in her shoes in certain ways,
Yeah,
in the way that we look at certain characters.
yeah. It's weird.
I mean, it's a really fine balance, and I think he did a really good job of doing that, right?
Yeah, it doesn't hurt.
Because it doesn't feel like we're in her shoes, in the sense that like we're looking at everything in her shoes.
Right,
It's more
right,
like
right.
we're looking at it in an omniscient kind of way, or like a
Yeah.
you know, yeah, in that way. But then we're also getting a little bit of this subjectivity
Right. Yes.
throughout.
Yeah. There is I mean, there's certainly emotion behind it, obviously, right?
Yeah.
So it's pretty neat. I was just trying to think, like, it's just funny the way he does like the violence in this movie. It's so like terribly choreographed. It's so like sloppy, but it's silly. Sometimes it's like hard to like get a grade on like even like where the violence starts or like the causation of it
Yeah.
because of that. We just um I was just thinking of like when we were talking about shots, the who was he after? I think it was when uh they find out. So basically, like the third brother, Wen Hung, is like engaging in like basically like drug dealing essentially,
Mhm.
and I guess he does it through like his brother's business or something, or like his brother finds out, um, and wants to put a stop to it, but then there's like somebody else involved that they need to get in contact with, and it's like in two different locations, and they're going back and forth, and they're trying to
Yeah.
like regroup, and there's like mob attacks like in every single scene,
Yeah.
and there's that one where like some guy in the far background is like meeting up with somebody else, and there's like that guy in the foreground smoking a cigarette, and then he like walks towards them, and he has like a sword in the back of his hand that like wasn't there before. It's like pretty cool to
Yeah.
kind of the way that he did that.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, "You're the worst assassin," because he like walks up halfway and he's like, "Ah!" I'm like, just
Let me tell everyone that I'm gonna kill you.
let me just announce myself.
Yeah.
Or even in like when Wen Lung Wen Hung, the oldest brother, dies, but like because he's like out gambling on the place,
Yeah.
and then the one of the friends
Yeah.
is like in the bathroom,
Aga or something. Yeah.
yeah.
He's
And
in
then he
the
meets like
bathroom.
one of the other guys in the
Yeah.
bathroom, and like that whole scuffle,
Debacle, yeah.
debacle happens. That's unfortunate. That
Yeah.
was unfortunate.
I like that. I like that shot of like it's like a very deep like a deep
The hallway.
the hallway.
Yeah, yeah.
And then, you know, in the foreground you have that mafia boss or whatever with the
Right,
gun.
right,
And
yeah.
then he's like fighting in the back and he like gets closer and closer.
Yeah. Before that, like when they're fighting in the bathroom, and then we cut to outside of the bathroom, and like then it like cuts
Like,
through the door, and the
yeah.
guy's on the phone. He's just like,
Like, what's going on?
it's just
Yeah.
another day in the office.
Yeah.
Nothing crazy is going
Yeah.
on. But yeah, lots of scummy stuff that happens in this movie. It's pretty
Yeah.
unfortunate. It's just sad.
Yeah. What did you think about Hiroe's character?
I mean, really, I think the most interesting is like Wenxing and Hiroe throughout the most of the film. They're the most chill for sure,
Mm.
at least in the beginning. And then there's like they're also like the saddest because they just get pulled into like a lot of the the corrupt government stuff that happens at the time,
Yeah.
especially in like the Nationalist Party. Like there's there's like a big massacre, and like a lot of the people that get confused between like who's Taiwanese and who's like mainland Chinese, and like they kind of get pulled into that. There's like a lot of just unfortunate sort of like misunderstandings and a lot of strife that comes with that. So they get caught in the mix of a lot of that happens.
Yeah.
And Hiro's character is really cool because he acts as like the best friend, and then like he's always with him. And then there's like a period when they get separated, when they have to go to like Taipei to
Yeah.
pay for something, and that's when like the riots and stuff were happening.
Yeah.
And they basically when she goes to prison, but Hiro comes back, and that's when he goes into hiding
Mhm.
after the fact. And then when Shin comes back, he tries to track him back down to find him. And then Hiro like joins like a resistance groups or whatever. And I think like that period is like the most interesting, right? Because like that's like the only time that they're like combative with one another,
Yeah.
right? Because Shin wants to stay with him, obviously, and
Yeah.
like help like the movement or what's going on. And Hiro is like, no, live your life. Get married to our friend who
His
is
sister.
in love with you. Yeah, his sister is like, my sister is in love with you.
Yeah.
And he's like, but I want to be with this. It's like hardcore like romance.
Yeah,
moment.
except he can't talk, so he's like that moment would be that moment, that climactic moment.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I can't leave
I
you, bro.
can't leave you, bro. And he's like, no, you can't live this life. You
Yeah.
better.
Yeah,
You're capable of so much.
yeah,
And so that whole thing goes down, and then so he ends up going back, and like it's really interesting because it cuts back and forth between him like having that moment when he was with Hiroe in like the mountains, and then cuts back to like when he comes back home and he's talking with Honomi, and he like exchanges notes, and he's like filling her in on everything.
yeah.
So that was a really cool like sequencing of doing that whole
Right. And how
part.
they reveal the information.
Right.
It's kind of like him explaining what happened to her.
Exactly.
To her.
Yeah,
about
because they
that.
don't even know, because the family doesn't even know where Hidaway went,
Yeah,
right? Like
yeah,
he wanted to keep it a secret from everybody to keep them safe, right?
yeah,
So, um, when comes back was just like, oh no, it's like I found your
yeah,
brother.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, that is going back to the ellipses and the way that he uses the cutting,
Mhm.
like the train thing.
Yeah, yeah,
It's the same technique, but
yeah.
yeah, it's really cool how he does that in the movie, and I think that the fact that he is mute kind of like adds to that
Sure,
because he can't
sure.
actually say it, so we're kind of given the images to see,
Right.
and then
That works really well.
and
Yeah.
yeah, I think that really adds to
I think it was really smart too, because like that's a problem to solve, right? Like I have a mute character that, he still has to communicate with other characters, right? And like
yeah,
how do I portray that in a way, but
without having him just like
just
just write
dialogue?
everything
Yeah.
because he doesn't really write too much as she writes, right?
Right,
She
right, right.
writes a lot more than him. Like whenever it's like him kind of explaining, we kind of go back to that,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And like we're seeing it rather than we're like being
Fed it. Yeah,
yeah,
through like words or
yeah,
dialogue or anything like that. Yeah.
which is really cool. Well, I mean, obvious because he can't talk, but that's a cool way of like doing that.
Yeah. But also like it doesn't feel out of place because he doesn't use it specifically for him either. Like,
Yeah.
it's a tool that he uses throughout the movie
Mhm.
for different things, or different scenes, and that helps a lot in just
Digesting them,
yeah, it's like film. It's like film language, right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, now we understand like the movie's talking in that way. And I think that was like really, really smart into not making that feel out of place,
Mhm.
right? So that was
Yeah.
really good. But yeah, I think in particular, Wen Xing and Hidawai are the most interesting characters. I think too, maybe that's on purpose. I think that's um they're the most kind of attracted to as well. They're the least problematic, possibly at least anyway.
Yeah.
What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, obviously, they're good characters. The third brother, who gets, brain
Yeah.
damaged. I think that was the most like for me, when I was first because it happens very early on, right?
Yeah,
Him
yeah.
getting brain damage and stuff. So like, at
You
first,
could say the first half of the movie like is about him
Mhm.
because yeah,
yeah, and at first, like, it was hard for me to like even realize what was going on. Like
yeah.
I mean,
Same.
I understood like, he got trauma from
Being tortured.
being tortured and stuff, and like he came back to the family and stuff. But I wasn't really like sure who he was until
After
like
the fact,
a
right?
lot later. Yeah,
Yeah.
when Atsi I think starts calling him uncle and stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
uncle? I thought Wen Ching was uncle. Wait, he's the
They're
third
all
brother.
uncles. Wait a minute.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Yeah, so like it took me a while for me
Yeah.
to like really figure that out.
It's like because he goes from being the main like plot and like problem, and then until after the math, and then he just becomes nothing for the rest
Right.
of, you know.
And in one sense, it's like he disappears. He's kind of dead in the
Essentially.
same sense of
Yeah.
like, in the same sense of the other brothers as well. You know, by
Right,
the end of
right.
the movie, it's like he's gone. Right? He's not fully there
Yeah, yeah.
in the mental sense. So like it's also kind of symbolic of him, dying in
Yeah.
one way. Like all the brothers are kind of gone in that
Right,
way.
right. Yeah.
So I think that was an interesting way of adding him into the puzzle. Like he's still part of the family,
Yes.
but
yeah.
then he's not there fully anymore. And then
Yeah, he's not
that's
the
kind
same.
of a theme in the movie as well
Mhm.
of just like the loss that you have, that you can see through all these four brothers.
Yeah. Yeah. Really, really interesting.
Yeah.
No way of putting it. What do you think of the eldest, Wen Hung?
I think he was an interesting character. I really liked his character, especially because we start from him. Like we start with him.
Yep.
When his baby is born and like he's the one who runs the restaurant and
Yeah.
stuff, and he's very like loud and bombastic,
Yeah.
and has like a temper and all that.
He is like the father figure.
Yeah,
in the
and
Phantom
yet like
Thread.
he still has like a sense of responsibility for his brothers,
Yes, yeah.
and like he wants to provide, like like the photography studio or whatever. Like he
Yeah,
wants
yeah.
to give that to Wen Ching as well, and he wants him to like get married with Hiromi and stuff like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
So like he has that a very like endearing like part of him.
Yeah,
He
yeah,
like he
yeah.
has his flaws,
He's
but he's
earnest.
a yeah,
Yeah.
he's trying to live the best he can. He has his vices and stuff, but he tries
True.
to,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think that's a very like well-rounded way of like portraying the character
Yeah.
and seeing him in all these different moments.
When you think about it, I mean every brother has their characteristics, right? Like they are unique to themselves,
Mhm.
right? And they all have like a very specific role in
Yeah.
essence. So I thought the funniest scene was when he's like throws a whole fucking super tantrum in the house and he's when
Yeah.
people were singing in his restaurant, he was like, "Stop singing!" breaks
Breaks the instrument.
his instrument.
Yeah.
And the grandfather, I guess like that's their dad, their father.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Don't mind that beat."
I like
He's just
the
stubborn.
moment when like he's like berating Wen Ching.
Yeah, yeah.
And he's like,
"He can't hear you."
Yeah, he's like, he can't hear you. It's like, you tell him what I said.
And he's
Yeah.
like, "Look, when a woman comes to you, doesn't even have a regard for her dignity, don't you understand?"
Yeah.
Legend is like,
Huh?
"I didn't act for this smoke, bro. What's
Yeah.
going on?"
Yeah.
Man.
Good moments.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. So yeah, I think like, his death is like probably the most sad because it's just like it's the most unforgiving in a way.
Mhm.
Like
And you like actually see it, right?
yeah,
Like,
that's
it's like you're seeing his moment when he dies.
yeah, and so I don't know. It's big Sag movie, City of Sag for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. How do you? I mean, compared to the other movies, how do you feel?
Yeah, I enjoyed it a lot. It is a tough movie to go through, I think, especially if you're not given the context. But like I think like the other movies,
Yeah,
the more you talk about the movie, the more good things you see about the movie.
Yeah.
Like the other three movies that we watched so far too. I think it does that. I think his movies do that a lot. And I think that's a mark of just like how rich like
Yeah.
like the movie is in what it's able to like show and how it's able to like provoke these thoughts and discussions around it.
Yeah.
And the way that he shot it and all of that really is quite masterful, and there's a lot to learn from that. And the way that he edited it, well, we talked about it a lot already,
Yeah.
but like all those little things add up, right? Like
They
all
do,
those
yeah.
little things come together and create something that I think that, like, although hard to get into, I think if you do like look at it with a sharp eye, like you can learn to appreciate it. And I think that's
Yeah.
the beauty of this movie for sure, and all of his movies are, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's as much as we for like the series is our biggest like critique is just the story and like pacing and like finding when we like latch onto the movie and then sort of get an understanding. Like that's really it. Like we never question even like the cinematography, the editing, like all that done is so well that it's you never bet an eye against it. The experience of watching it is always like it's just smooth. It's always beautiful. Like he just knows exactly what to shoot, where to put a camera.
Yeah.
Like he just knows.
And like the emotional like atmosphere I talked about before too,
Yeah.
like just like creating that,
Yeah.
like it's not an easy thing to do.
No.
And then he makes it feel so seamless, like, and so like
Exactly.
effortless.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the beauty of it.
It is just always a work of art, and as we have a discussion, we are able to like that was going like there's a richness to the movie. We kind of get more as we talk about after the fact, but it's like it's a true mark to be like technically like I have nothing to say about this movie. Like the only thing that we have discussions about is the subjectivity in the story and everything else, right? Which is obviously, it's always the most nuanced in that sense. But it's like watching experience, like, really is a master craftsman of being a filmmaker. So yeah, that we can say for sure.
Great movie.
Pretty good. I like this one a lot. We will finally be in the last next week.
Yes.
As we cut out Cute Girl because it doesn't exist anymore. It's not on this planet.
It's hard to find.
But we decided we will finish with Summer at Grandpa's released in 1984. And so that was this is 10, so that was his 8th movie. Wait,
yeah, I think it's also part of his one of his trilogies too. Like his I think Time to Live and Time to Die was part of it, and Summer at Grandpa's, and there was one more, I think.
Okay,
it's kind of part of the autobiography, like that kind of like that family trilogy something. I forget what it was exactly, but
okay, I'll look into it when we get to it. So yeah, it'll be Summer at Grandpa's. We were able to find that one, and then that's what we'll wrap up with. So pretty exciting, and then we can move on to something new.
Yes.
And I kind of want to do something like really action packed. Like, I feel like tonally it's been really like low.
Yeah.
I need to go like way. I need to be fed just like pure entertainment, you know? Like
we could do that.
Brain dead plot. Just like
no plot, all action. Let's go.
All action, yeah. It needs to be like a detective master martial artist. Like,
yeah.
I'm talking like he takes 20 bullets to the chest and he's still walking, you know?
We could do that.
Certainly. But yeah. So
anyways, Summer at Grandpa.
We'll do it.
Grandpa's.
Grandpa.
Gramps.
Gramps.
Yeah.
Cheapa.
Next week.
Yeah. We'll see you then. Peace.
Bye.